Happy Sunday morning, Stampers. My name is Kathy Hansen, and today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful card that was made from elements from the June 2021 Paper Pumpkin by Stampin' Up. The paper behind this is from the Expressions in Ink Designer Series paper, which this set was made to coordinate with. These are the pieces parts, and I'm going to show you how I did some of these different, there's a little splatter. I don't know if you can see that too much. It's very subtle, just a little splatter of color on both of the butterflies. Here's the other butterfly, and then also a little bit on the paper. So I'm going to show you how I did that as we go. And let's do that first and get it out of the way. So to do that little splatter, the reason I did that is because I just wanted to have something other than stark white butterflies on the front of the card. I did a prototype of the card, and this was the card with just white butterflies without that little sprinkling of color. And I think that it's a very subtle difference, but it's enough that it made a difference. My husband was able to spot the difference, so that's a good sign that it was worth the effort of doing this. So to start out with, I used my Aqua Painters, and I filled these Aqua Painters with, actually one of them is out of my stash that I used. It's got Tranquil Tide ink in it with some water. One of them has, but you also, in substitution of this Tranquil Tide, Soft Succulent would be a good Stampin' Up! Color for that. This one is Evening Evergreen. Again, it's just some water and several little drops of the ink, the refill ink, and this one is Pear Pizzazz, same thing. So I took an entire sheet of thick white cardstock, and I took my bone folder and my Aqua Painter. And normally I do the whole sheet at a time, and I have a splash box for that catches all the splatters. But since I'm not using the splash box, I'm just going to do a small sampling of it in the center. But what I do is I just take my bone folder. You could take a pencil or anything that's stable, anything that's not flexible. And all I did was splatter some paint onto the paper. You can kind of see where it's starting to splatter here. Okay, then I took my Tranquil Tide or Soft Succulents, and I add a little bit darker color over top of this. And as this dries, it becomes a little lighter, this particular color. And the final thing I did was the Evening Evergreen, which is the color of the card base that we're making today for the card. And I just put a few little flecks of that in there just to give it a little bit of contrast. Okay, so there we have it. That's what I did to create the splatter. And then I cut the die cuts out of it. But for the inside of the card, all I did was a little corner up here. I just wanted to have a little splatter that I could use to put behind my butterflies, because since we're having butterflies on the front, of course we had to have butterflies on the inside, right? And this piece of paper is 5 1/4 by 4 inches. And that's just going to go right up here in the corner. Okay, then I used my liquid glue, and I just put a tiny bit on the back of each of these two butterflies. And these two butterflies, by the way, came from a retired Stampin' Up! Butterfly punch. But it's the best butterfly I could find for the inside. So there are my butterflies on the inside, and that is the inside of the card. I didn't add anything else because for a Thinking of You card, I'm not real fond of putting in any particular greeting, because I figure at some point I'm going to be using it, and then I'll decide if it's going to be a birthday card or a sympathy card or what it might be. So let me take my bone folder and just increase that crease a little bit, make it nice and crisp. I'm going to set this cardstock aside for just a minute, and I'm going to assemble the piece that's going to go on the front before I put it on the front, because it's a little bit different size than I usually use. So what I have here is a piece of cards. This is the white cardstock, and this layer is 4 3/4 by 3 3/4 inches. And you don't need to worry about writing down all these measurements, because they all appear on kathyscraftroom.blogspot.com. This piece was embossed, and this is actually from the Paper Pumpkin kit. I'm going to show you that Paper Pumpkin kit because it's a pretty cool kit. It is absolutely gorgeous. Hopefully I'm not going to cause an avalanche over here next to the camera while I take this stuff. Okay, this is the Paper Pumpkin kit. It came in this beautiful box, and it had 3 different designs. We're only going to use one of the colors, but the colors that it had in the original kit were the pieces parts to make these 3 cards. This was the card that was intended to be used for what we're making now. It's a note card size. So the pieces parts that I used from there were actually, from that kit, were actually just these 4 elements. So the label that we're using on the front of the card was one of these labels. The card, this piece was cut from this card base. This is the card base for the 5" by 3.5" note card. And what I did is I cut it down the center, and then I trimmed it from 5 inches to 4.5 inches to get this piece. And then this piece is the one that we're using here. And for this, all I did was cut it in half. So that is going to be going on here. And then the last thing we're using from that are these beautiful iridescent sequins, self-adhesive sequins. So let's put this back aside. And I embossed this with the Time Worn Type 3D embossing folder, which is in the current mini catalog, the July through December 2021 mini catalog. And I don't know, yeah, you can see that pretty well on there, I think. It's got words, partial words actually. I don't think that you can really read anything here that makes sense. And then it's got these kind of splashes of, I don't know what it is, just stuff on there. So what I'm going to do is adhere this piece, and the final size of this piece is 3.5 by 4.5 inches. And I'm going to center that over this piece. And then I'm going to take this piece. This piece ended up being 3 1/4 inches by 2 3/8 inches. This piece is 3.5 inches by 2 5/8 inches. And I'm just going to adhere this designer paper. It's actually a little thicker than the designer paper. It's kind of like heavy cards, not heavy cardstock, but more like cardstock than the normal patterned paper. And hopefully I'll get this centered. Okay, now this piece is going to be centered on here. And it doesn't matter which way you go, just however the design pleases you. Now I need to take a quick look at this and make sure, since it does have letters, I want to make sure that it's right side up when I put it on the front of my card. Now I'm ready to put it on the front of my card. I find that when I'm doing pieces like this, normally I layer up from the bottom on the front of the card. So I would put this piece down first, then this piece, this piece, this piece. But in this case, because it's a different kind of a size, I just wanted to make this piece first so that I could layer the entire thing up and have it look fairly even. Okay, and straight. Okay, then we had the greeting, and I stamped "Thinking of You" on here. This is actually not a Stampin' Up! Stamp. This is out of my stash, and I believe it's a Hero Art stamp. I have it in my cheat sheet, and I actually have listed that also on my blog, I believe. But I'm going to add the sentiment now that I have everything squared up on here. Now I can add the sentiment and make sure that that is even and straight. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to add these beautiful butterflies, and I'm just going to put a little piece of the part I poked out. I'm just going to put a thin line of glue down the center, and I'm going to line that up so that you can see the words right here. Just hold that in place for a couple of seconds to dry the glue, and then the other little butterfly, the smaller, I'm going to just kind of put up here somewhere. And then, of course, the final part of this card is to add a little bling, because no card is complete without at least a small amount of bling. Okay, maybe manly cards not so much, but most of my cards will have some kind of an embellishment on them, just because I think it adds a little bit of interest. So these are self-adhesive, so I'm just going to grab it off of here, and I'm going to put one there. I'm going to put another one here, and another one here. 3 is always a good number for me. Any odd number, I think, is usually a good one for cards. It's kind of a design rule, I think. And where did I put my original card? Here it is. This is the finished card. I hope you enjoyed this video, and again, please visit my blog at kathyscraftroom.blogspot.com for all the details and measurements. Thank you.